Hello and welcome to Aliens Revealed Live. I'm your host, Dean Caparella, here on the Paranormal UK radio network. From alien abductions to monster-infested ranches, men in black, near-death experiences, close encounter experiences and more, we speak to some of the most amazing people on the planet, ready and willing to share their chilling stories with you, and they all come from the Aliens Revealed Live files here on the Paranormal UK radio network. Well, are crop circles real? Again, to borrow a line from the hit television series Ancient Aliens, that would be a resounding yes. The question people are probably asking is not so much are crop circles real, but are crop circles man-made or alien-made? That's the vexing question, and the truth is it's one we may never get the answer to in our lifetime unless full disclosure happens. Crop circle expert Jennifer Stein gave a presentation during Aliens Revealed Live and said that they'll basically stay a mysterious part of human folklore, for the time being at least. Crop circles appear regularly around the world, yet while they appear out-of-this-world creations, their validity has been stained by several hoaxes during the past 4 decades. Stein says the answer is out there somewhere, but as yet, we don't have it. The crop circle mystery may very well stay a mystery. Factors such as people making crop circles and an almost lack of evidence of them actually being formed muddy the waters when discussing whether they are man-made or ET engineered. This has made the job tougher for researchers in ascertaining what to believe and what to dismiss as a hoax. And there are plenty of people out there promoting that theory. But then again, maybe that's what those pulling the strings behind the scenes want to achieve. Confusion. Is there an agenda? Is this just another cog in the whole UFO agenda that serves those wishing to keep the rest of us guessing? So earlier we mentioned an almost lack of evidence of crop circles being formed. Jennifer Stein gave a couple of examples in the past where the culprits, probably otherworldly, were almost caught in the act. We don't know that crop circles are real, both hoaxed and unexplained. The evidence is right there in plain sight for everyone to see. And research and testing have concluded there is a big difference in man-made circles and those that are yet to be explained. Stein related one very famous case where a circle was being created with the observer almost in the thick of the action, but its legitimacy is very clouded. Jennifer Stein says her job is not to convince people that crop circles are made by otherworldly beings. Are crop circles real? Yes, but who is creating them? Jennifer Stein is joining us right now. Hi, Jennifer. Jennifer, hello.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Dean.
Great to have you. So, crop circles, a natural phenomena, man-made or otherworldly?
Well, I think you've got both. You can't look at this topic and say it's one or the other. There's definitely man-made formations, and you're foolish not to address them. I mean, there have been major symposiums around man-made formations. The Guardian newspaper ran a little festival a number of years back, I think in 1993, and gave out awards for the best man-made formation. So there's definitely hoaxers that are out there. I don't completely understand why they continue to do it, how they're paid, how they finance their operations, because time is money. And they're also destroying public property, which they can be arrested for. So it's only 1 or 2 cases during the period of time of mad cow disease and hoof and mouth disease that actually well-known hoaxers who claimed to have made formations. Of course, they didn't prove they made them, but they claimed they made them, and they were arrested and put in jail because of the mad cow disease. But generally speaking, certainly in England, formations continue year after year after year, but they do happen all around the world as well, but not with the same amount of consistency that they happen in England.
So what's the difference between a hoax circle and one that has no explainable cause?
Well, I would say a whole combination of things. There are eyewitnesses to instantaneous formations which have happened. In fact, literally a handful of eyewitnesses have experienced that. Andy Thomas was one. this gal who runs BLT Research, Nancy Talbot, was present for some. Another guy by the name of Gary King, I witnessed some appearing literally at about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. When you go in and look at the crops and look at the soil, which crop circle researchers do, we dig up the crop, we send it off to a lab, we have it examined under a microscope, we do seed germination studies. William Levengood was very active in doing this for many years, and he clearly showed that seeds showed different germination times depending on when the crop circle appeared. If it appeared very early in the germination of the crop, or when the crop was very young, it tended to stunt the growth in the seeds, and the seeds wouldn't germinate or at all, or if they did, their growth was suppressed. When you got crop that was mature and it got hit with some sort of what I call an energy signature, it tended to have increased growth in yield by 33 or 40%. And it was uniform across all the seeds. So it was definitely a dramatic increase. And in fact, William Levengood was so impressed with this, he invented a piece of equipment called it was like he would shock seeds with an avalanche of electrical charge. He called it the MRI stress guard, and he actually patented this, and he showed that he could increase seed germination and crop durability to drought and insect issues, all with an electrical charge that the seed would then recover from and be stronger, and it would germinate faster. So that's one example. There's also soil samples that show unusual changes in the soil, like increased amounts of magnetic material, micron iron-sized balls, like little tiny ball bearings. How do they form and appear in the crop? Also, coagulations of iron and things like this that are almost melted into clumps and clusters with other soil. And the amount of like iron oxide in the soil was like 20 to 100 times greater than normal soil samples you can find in the rest of the field. So just within where the pattern is, there's these unusual things. And of course, you walk in with your cell phone, right? And you're on a phone call and you walk in with your cell phone and suddenly all the bars drop off your phone. When you're in the formation, you take 4 steps back and suddenly you've got reception. So that magnetic material on the ground is setting up some sort of distortion field electromagnetically. And when you're in a hoaxed or a man-made crop circle, I'll say even using the term man-made is a little tricky because we're not really quite sure what the source is of these formations and how they're being made. But when you walk into one that was made with men with boards, I'll say, or women with boards, right, by rolling or pressing down the crop, you don't get these electrical distortions. You don't get the seed germination studies that are quite unique and different. You don't get the magnetic material in the crop. Plus, you don't get the expulsion cavities. A lot of times, the stems or the crops have these nodes in them that are very thick with the most water or viscous part of the crop. So when they are hit with some sort of high energy electrical force, which we believe is what's causing these formations, the fluid inside the crop heats up and turns to steam. And these softer tissue areas of the side of the crop, the nodes, tend to seep the liquid out of them, or they blow apart, or they explode, or they open in a crevice like a vesica piscis. They just split. Depending on the type of the crop it is, it has a slightly different reaction. Soybeans, of course, react differently than wheat or barley, but you have these, what I call energy signatures. A lot of people think they're burnt. They're actually not. It's a form of necrosis. It's like a bacteria that grows, or a fungus that grows on the side of the crop, because the fluid's on the outside and bugs come by and land on it, leaf bacteria, and it degrades, and it's called necrosis, but it's a darkening.
Yeah.
You can clearly see, and you can sometimes see literally right through the hole of the expulsion cavity. It blows out both sides of the node very quickly.
So these bugs that land on it while the process is happening, do they get, what's the word?
They often get cooked or literally fried. They stick to the crop. So you can find all sorts of, hard cooked bugs, flies, and ants, sometimes mice. I've heard of porcupines, squirrels, birds that are all killed in the process. And when you look at them, it almost looks like they were put into a microwave. If you look at them under an X-ray, they're literally hard cooked.
I'm fascinated to understand when you say witnesses, the people that actually saw these actually saw them being formed?
Yes, there have been a number of eyewitnesses. A very famous one named John Whalen. People claim his footage is hoax, but he was actually sleeping on Oliver's Castle, and I think this was about 1995 or 98. I'm not exactly sure on the date, but he's an Englishman. Camping out, had a tent, had his nice little home video camera on a tripod covered with a baggie because it gets very damp and moist, in England at night. And he woke up at about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning and heard this very unusual sound. And he got out of his tent, was looking around. He really couldn't see much going on, but he pointed, turned on his camera, and his camera didn't even have a viewfinder, right? He had to look at it with his eyepiece. And he just turned the camera on and pointed it in the direction where he was hearing the sound coming from. He didn't even move it. He just turned it on, and then he was looking around thinking, well, maybe he'll capture something. And sure enough, he captured these two lights kind of coming in and floating around in the crop. And then the crop kind of just literally fell down instantaneously. And there are other people who have reported this. A guy by the name of Art Rantala here in the United States, I think in Mayville, Wisconsin, was getting ready to watch a rainstorm move across his field and his property. And he saw some wheat like just wiggling all of a sudden, and then it just kind of collapsed. And then he saw a shadow in the field. And he walked out there the next day, and sure enough, there was, crop down. And it was investigated, and it had the typical energy signatures that we see, like expulsion cavities, and seed germination studies were done. And if the soil sticks to a magnet, if you take a good-sized magnet into a field and just dig up some soil and stick the magnet to it, if it's sticking, well, there's something unusual there. That's a quick, easy test, right? You can walk, 50 feet to the right and test the soil over there. And if you don't get the same thing, something kind of unusual went on.
Yeah. Do you think there's a message from, say, ET in crop circles? And if there is anyone trying to decipher it?
Well, there are many people. And I would say I may not be an expert on that particular topic, but there have been some perplexing formations. Certainly there has been a code that was identical or very similar to a code that Carl Sagan came up with that we sent into space in Arecibo in 1975, actually, as a publicity stunt to try to get attention to what Arecibo was doing and maybe even raise money. So we created this binary code of the shape of Arecibo, the number of planets in our solar system, the size of our human body, what our genetic structure is made out of, what's called punch, our chemical makeup inside our physical bodies, our population, our number counting system. It was like a structured code, and it had a pattern to it. And one of these appeared actually in England, right outside of the windows of this signal receiving center named Chirbolton in England, where there's large disc arrays to see if we hear unusual signals coming from space. So it was a very interesting place to actually have that pattern appear. Paul Vigay was a researcher at the time. We have since lost him, unfortunately, under mysterious circumstances, but Paul was the one who finally decoded it, because when you were on the ground, you really couldn't figure out what it was. And in those days, we didn't have drones, so we were flying helicopters to kind of get pictures of things to understand them. So many people thought, oh, that's a definite sign, and there's somebody definitely trying to communicate with us. These are messages. There are other formations have appeared where there's an alien face holding a disc, which Paul Vigay also translated, and it had a very clear message, like beware of false promises. There are those that are trying to deceive you. The conduit is closing. Wake up now, pay attention. who knows if those are an intelligent species trying to communicate with us, or if this isn't some type of scalar wave technology that can be used for defense, and it's instead turned onto specific areas of the crop, and quick impressions are dropped down into the crop with some type of scalar wave, or if it's not actually an opposite process. Through my research, I think that what's actually happening is energy is often drawn up out of the ground rather than something impressed down. It appears to us that the crop is laid down and something has pressed it or ironed it or steamed it, right, or shocked it down, weakening the crop. But it literally could be an energy signature, and it's some type of energy signature that's being drawn powerfully up from under the ground, because many of these areas are limestone, water aquifers, green sand aquifers. They have high electrical charge, certainly in the summer. And if you have something that is focusing that charge that's in a large underground aquifer, I mean, England has the largest green sand underground aquifer that runs from one end of the country to the other. And a majority of all these crop circles are happening along the edges of that aquifer, which electrically, when you speak to an electrical engineer or a geologist that studies, say, earthquakes, they can explain that to you in a way far more articulately than I can. But it could be a natural phenomenon, or a phenomenon that's triggered by a little tweaking. Now, is that a man-made thing? Is that some of our military playing around with us? Is that ET using a natural occurring electrical phenomenon that they can, quickly manipulate? Yep. I have no idea. I've never had an ET land in my yard and tell me,
no.
Right? So I'm left with this big question, and I go out and speak to groups like the Rotary Group, right? If I show up and say, yes, ET's giving us a message, they're just going to laugh me out the back door and say, well, thanks for coming. But there's so much to these odd phenomenon of UFOs appearing, of course, and odd phenomenon and signs in the ground like crop circles. I want to take people into a journey of exploration, and I need to stay very grounded. And I have a science background, so when I present, I give them the facts and let them decide what they think. I don't try to put ideas in their mind and tell them this is definitely ET communicating with us. There's no way I could prove that.
Well, the message in Signs, of course, was a malevolent one. They were bad aliens. But so far, so good with us. We haven't seen that.
Right. That film was done very near where I live, and where a good friend, Linda Howe, was living at the time, too. Yeah.
Okay. Is there an historical aspect to crop circles? Are they recent?
Yes, okay. Yes, there is an historical aspect. There's lots of Indian records that show they were drawn and they happened. Also, crop circles appear near ancient sites, like conical mounds, earthen mounds, places like Silbury Hill in England, or the snake mounds that we have in Peterborough, Canada. We also have one in Ohio called Serpent Mound. So a lot of these formations, obviously they're going to appear where there's crops, right? That's a well-known phenomenon, but they appear near or in proportion to these ancient sites, which also may have some unusual electrical components to them. Like if you take some pack of seeds and take them to the top of a conical mound and leave them there for a couple of days, they're going to have a subtle energy change just from being in that area. Or say an area like Göbekli Tepe, right, in Turkey. That's high plateau, a lot of limestone. You have all these limestone pillars. You take something there and leave it there for a while, it's going to have a subtle electrical change to the seed. So I'm just noting that, but I'll go back to the original question about historical references. Andy Thomas, actually an English researcher, dug up the source of a wonderful picture of a devil kind of walking around in this little crop circle, and he's got a hatchet or a some type of farming tool, and he's actually cutting the crop, and he's sort of cutting it in a circular pattern. And this came out of a wood block in about 1678 that was done in an English parish. So a church parish paper was published where a farmer was complaining about the fact that the night before in his field, the sky was like all ablaze with these unusual orbs or lights flying around. He said the sky was like on fire above his crop. And the next day, he saw all of his crop down. And he was like, why didn't the devil just cut the crop and take it away with him, was the comment from this. And this block, this artist block, was actually done for this parish newspaper. So someone bothered to actually make this little wood block to print this paper. So it's really quite fascinating. That's from the time of Shakespeare. Shakespeare wrote about them as well. He called them, you were visited by the mowing devil, or you had a fairy ring, in your field, and people would play in them. Certainly during the Second World War, lots of Brits, were pushed out into the Wiltshire farm country, out of downtown London. Their parents wanted them safe. They sent them to their aunt and uncle, right, or a church parish or something took them. And so the kids were playing in crop circles because they were happening during the middle of the Second World War. So I know many people who were like my parents' age who talked about that.
Yeah. Did they only ever happen, say, in wheat, barley, and corn crops? I mean, do someone with a large back or front yard with high lawn, do they happen on other vegetation?
Yes, they happen in tall grasses. They happen in people's corn patches, I've heard. I've even heard of them happening in ice and snow. This is a more recent phenomenon coming to light in that people have cameras, and they have video cameras on their cell phones. They'll walk out on their property, or they'll see something. I've heard of literally ice rings being melted and people coming upon them and having them spin. And there's lots of video of that out there now. There's even one on the Charles River in Boston. Somebody was standing on the bridge. There was a thin sheet of ice with some snow on top of it. So the ice was almost too thin to walk on. And there was this clearly cut melted ring that was, wide, and so sometimes the melted rings are quite wide. It's almost like a funnel or cone has melted the ice. And when you study plasma energy, I've spent a year going through Anthony Peratt's book called The Physics of Plasmas, and you see how plasmas function and operate, sometimes even together. You can see these sheath-like plasma cones, sometimes nested one inside another, that have high, fast-moving electrons in different directions of different power forces. It makes you think that, okay, maybe this is some type of scalar wave or plasma activity that's being manipulated. And of course, a water situation is much like an underground aquifer, right? Where you have water moving, you have electrons being stripped. So you have a very volatile or highly electrical situation, which can react quickly. So I'm not surprised that we're seeing ice rings.
Yeah. I just wanted to go back to the hoax crop circles. I just always wondered whether there's a sinister agenda behind those committing the hoaxes, or maybe there's someone behind the people actually forming the crop circles who have an agenda, and I'm not sure what it is, but it could be.
Well, I am not sure either. I can tell you I hear rumors, but I couldn't tell you that they're real or not. But I have heard that many of these, I'll call them younger kids because I'm in my 60s, so maybe they're in their 40s or 30s or 20s. They often have nice cars, nice cell phones. They're not working, or if they are working, they're barrists, they're baristas, right, in a coffee shop or something. They haven't necessarily been to college. They're driving very nice cars. Sometimes they're living in a type of government housing where other ministers of state have lived. And you have to beg the question, what's going on here? This has been reported in England. I don't know too many hoax formations that are happening in the United States, although I suspect they could. But I'm mostly in touch with legitimate researchers who spend their hard-earned money and vacation time driving to 4 states east or west of them to go take soil samples and check out what's going on in a formation. And I have to say, now that we have lost William Levengood, we're really looking for some new biologists and who want to step up and get involved in this field. There's a mark for them to make in continuing to do research in this area.
Okay. Yeah, it's almost like, watch the left hand and you won't see the right. Type thing, yeah.
Right. Pay attention to don't look at the man behind the curtain. Pay attention to what's happening on the screen over here.
Exactly. Is there one country that's more of a crop circle hotspot than another?
I would definitely say England is, because it's got the largest green sand aquifer, right, that moves straight through it. And when you look at the United States, there are certain states that have large green sand aquifers as well that roll right through them. So you can look at parts of, say, central Canada, between the Great Lakes regions, between Lake Huron and Lake Ontario, that kind of a swath that kind of moves right down through that area, right into parts of northern Pennsylvania, Erie, and straight on into Ohio, and then rolls right down into Kentucky. And those areas have had some of the largest number of formations in the United States happening. So wherever you have these large geologic structures like this, deep underground, lots of limestone, you're going to have increased numbers of formations happening. Yes.
You mentioned some examples earlier, but do you have a favorite crop circle? Is there one more interesting than the others?
Oh, well, Barbary Castle was like a time when a lot of us were really waking up, to the crop circles. That was probably one of my favorite ones. Because it was just so different. There was a period of time when the only people doing research was like Colin Andrews and Pat Delgado, and all the formations were circles and quintuplets and series of circles of 4 and 6 and 8 type of things. And then finally, when Barbary Castle came, it was like, wow, there's a pyramid, there's a circle, and then there have been variations on similar themes. It's like, that was a real turning point for me. And of course, I've been in a number of great formations. I loved the Swallow Formation. I was in it in one of the first days it appeared. So, you have relationships where you have memories of things that occurred in certain formations. I remember being in a famous formation. Some people referred to it as the pillow, but it literally looked like it was like a pyramid from the ground, or it looked like a pyramid from the ground because the wheat stalks literally bent at different nodes.
Right.
So as you walked in, it had a dimensional level of unusualness. I'd never seen anything like this. It wasn't all the crop lying down. Some crop was, up to the second node and then bent, and the other crop was the third node and bent. And I remember having a conversation with a wonderful German researcher there, whom I don't remember his name, but he said, crop circles are like consciousness for the planet, because he said it attracts all of us from all over the world. We meet out here in the middle of nature. We're like the honeybees coming for the knowledge or the understanding or even the experience of what this crop circle is offering us. And then we're bringing it back. We're bringing it home to our communities, and we're pollinating our homes or our communities with these new conscious ideas. And I thought that was a really lovely analogy. Yes, there you have to be a little bit crazy to want to go hike through people's private property and sometimes maybe even risk getting arrested. Most of us like to make sure we're putting a nickel or a quarter or a pence or something in a box to give us permission to go into someone's field. And farmers like to do that because they don't want to get tracked down all day long when they're trying to manage their crops and farm. They don't want cell phone calls all day long. Oh, there's another crappie here. He wants to walk out into the field. So he posts a sign and says, you can enter. Just don't destroy any crop. Walk in the tram lines. Don't smoke a cigarette. Don't leave any trash. Be respectful that this is private property. And if you put a quarter in here to agree to this contract, you can go in, and it just makes it easier for them. They're not making any money at it. A lot of debunkers say, "Oh, they made it themselves because they're making money." Well, hardly. The crop's worth about $10,000. Maybe they make about $25 over the summer with people putting nickels in their box.
Yeah. Does the research on crop circles actually reach a point where you just can't do any more? I mean, is there no more research that you can do on them?
Well, sort of, yes. I would like to say that I've emailed a couple of very interesting people that study earthquakes. And right before an earthquake is going to happen, usually there's some kind of plasma discharge that happens on the surface. And sometimes this can even be seen or even heard. You hear things like, an electrical rumble that's going on. I have read a lot of the earthquake studies, and I'm convinced that possibly something similar or a similar electrical discharge is taking place, but it's coming from a different medium. It's coming from a softer medium, not like a hard rock that's hitting one another or shell plates that are overlapping, but a different type of medium, like literally built up electrical charge inside like an aquifer of sorts, or from, porous limestone. So I'd love to be able, in areas where there are known formations that happen all the time, to literally put sensor or probes in the ground. We could probably do this, but it would take a large amount of coordination and a large amount of funding. And there's no money to be made in this. So it would have to be a big production company or something that would want to undertake this. But I have thought or designed, as I'm waking up in the morning, I think, oh, that would be a great idea.
Yeah.
We could try this. But of course, getting the sensor equipment, not having it stolen, not having the farmer run over it, it's all quite a tricky process.
Yeah.
But I'd love to see more research done. Do I think logically it would happen? Probably not.
So do they remain a mystery?
Basically, yes. I think that they do. They're certainly still a mystery to me. If I think I had the answer, I'd probably make a documentary film and tell people what it was. But the more I dig in different areas, like just studying plasmas and how they operate, the laws in which they abide by, it has really impressed me, the overlap and correlation that you see in crop circle formations. So I'd love to see, say, scientists more trained than I, with higher degrees of background and education and understanding of these intricate levels of science, apply themselves to the crop circle mystery. But that's yet to be seen.
Yeah. Well, maybe there's no message in crop circles. Maybe it's just ET showing off and making them because they can. Well,
if it is an ET communication, it's certainly a creative way to reach us. And like my friend in Germany said, it is a pollination process, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe they're actually trying to affect us. If it's an ET, infusion, they might be trying to affect our food. And by affecting our food, affect us. It may be a way to try to create stabilization in our food crop. You could look at it that way. Or it could be some type of crop war that our military is engaged in as well in other countries. Who knows, right?
Yeah. Okay, a couple more questions before we wind it up. Off crop circles, and you've done a lot of work with Travis Walton recently. Produced a terrific documentary. I watched it a couple of times. Is that documentary available for people to watch?
Yes. They can go to Amazon and Google it there on Amazon, or they can go to my film website, which is or the website for that film, which is called TravisWaltonTheMovie.com. There's a link right there for Amazon. You can click on that and stream it there. If people are interested in buying a DVD, we still sell DVDs. and I have a little eBay link. You can click on that and buy a DVD that way. You can also buy a DVD from Travis. He'll mail it to you. His website is traviswalton.com. But yeah.
I love the actual storyboard of the documentary from beginning to end, and they wind up in the spot that it all happened. That was very well done.
Thank you. I used the services of a great young filmmaker who happens to be my cousin, or my nephew, Adam Stein. I had a 4-hour film, and I knew I needed it to be an hour and a half, and he was the one who really helped me restructure it, and I'm very grateful for him, for his help.
Okay, last question. I'm asking everyone this question about disclosure. Are we close? And if we are and it happens, what will the world look like in your opinion?
Well, I'd like to think that we're certainly on the brink of it if it hasn't happened already. I think December 16th, 2017 was a pretty close arrival or horizon for disclosure. It looks to me like with what the Navy's coming out with and the gun footage that's been released, and the open discussions which are now happening, and the new television shows which are out there. We have, I think, is it called Unacknowledged, possibly? Yep. There's a number of great new shows that are out there. And the boys from TTSA, To the Stars Academy. These top military, former military people and Pentagon people like Luis Elizondo, Jim Semivan, Chris Mellon, they are bringing their years of experience to the table and making it public to the American people who are curious. Now, they're being debunked and they're being ridiculed. And you have other people like Neil deGrasse Tyson saying, they don't know what they're talking about. I'm sorry. I think that they do know what they're talking about. And I think there have always been people inside the inner circles, the inner close military circles, who have felt that we needed to be honest about this. And I think that we're certainly seeing it. It might be disclosure with what we call a little d, because it's not, President Trump coming forward and saying, well, folks, we've lied about this for 60, 70 years. Now we're going to tell you the truth. Who would believe Trump anyway, right? If that was the case. So I think it's got to come from these people who have worked in the projects. And there's been years of deathbed confession.
Yeah. But you said something there that really kind of worries me, where you said that we've been lying to you for 60 or 70 years, because my vision of a post-disclosure period immediately after it happens is one of extreme anger from folks.
Well, we could very well have that, because there's this malaise, certainly in the United States, where this disclosure is taking place. There has been the topic's been debunked for so long that people have thought, well, if they're not bothering us, right? I'll back up a second and I'll say most governments have a barometer upon which they evaluate the ET threat. They look at the situation and say, can they outmaneuver us? Well, clearly that's the case. And they've demonstrated that time and time and time again, right? From the 40s right straight through till this, most recent things with the Nimitz that have become public. So we know they outmaneuver us, but do they actually demonstrate some sort of threat? Are they doing threatening things? Well, you could interpret it different ways. There's been many encounters where they have rendered our nuclear weaponry inert. Lots of Minuteman missiles were taken down. A famous book was written by Robert Salas called Fated Giant, which goes into the period in the 60s where this was happening with our missiles. Now we have different types of equipment that are being examined, sometimes by alien craft, and sometimes parts of it are melted. Sometimes the electronics just melt and they don't function the way they were supposed to. So is that a threat? They're not necessarily blowing them up, right? They weren't blowing up those Minuteman missiles under the ground and rendering those areas uninhabitable. No, they just made the missile not function.
Yeah.
So maybe they're showing a sign of higher intelligence, like, no, you really can't or shouldn't be using these, because these are going to kill all life, and maybe they value our planet because maybe they're here as well. Yeah. Maybe there are bases underground that they have. So are they threatening? Well, it depends on how you look at it. Maybe, maybe not. So that's how governments evaluate.
Yeah.
Do we need to be worried? Do we need to tell the public? And I would say if I was the president, I'd probably react the same way. Let's not tell the public what they don't need to know, because we don't need panic or upset. We need the economy to work well. We need our kids to get educated. We need to continue to grow food and feed the hungry, and solve our bridge collapsing issues, and build our infrastructure, and figure out if we're going to be attacked by something coming in from outer space. We may have asteroid problems, which are far more likely, or sun flare problems, which are far more serious than an ET issue.
Yeah. Well,
it's a complicated question.
Yeah. And I guess to be fair to the president, I think other than George Bush Sr., I don't think many of the presidents in the last 50 or 60 years really have much of a clue of what's going on.
Right. Certainly, we know Carter had sightings, and so did Reagan, and they spoke about them.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we're kind of getting off on a bit of a transit here, Jennifer, but it's been a great discussion. Love the presentation on crop circles, and I'm sure, I'd love to get you back on again. We have a podcast planned for some time in the future, but we could, because your expertise kind of is a lot more than just crop circles.
A little bit.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer.
It's my curiosity. It gets me in trouble.
Yeah.
I dig into rabbit holes maybe I shouldn't be in.
You got to have a curiosity. Thank you, Jennifer.
It was a pleasure. It was a real pleasure, Dean. Thank you.
That's leading crop circle researcher and investigator Jennifer Stein. Kevin Briggs has had a lifelong contact with extraterrestrials, and his first alien visitor appeared when he was just 8 years old. Now in his 60s, Briggs has been on a mission in recent years to share his experiences. This came following a request from his alien friends.
Well, the next experience after that would be, let me think now, I would be 14 and I was actually introduced to the whole of the Council of Eight, not just Orton D. And how that occurred, I had a paper round. And I would obviously leave the house every morning. And when I left in the morning, there was always a craft over the house. I would go out the back door, look up, and there would be a craft there. And then a second craft would always appear. It would come from one horizon, either left or the right, join the craft. And so two craft would then follow me around the paper round, as it were. And but I was always aware that there was some other beings with me as I was going around the paper round. I could feel their vibrational energy, their vibrational frequency. So on one occasion, I plucked up the courage to ask them to show themselves, and they did. Two beings appeared, two small greys, as we understand now with our modern culture in relation to the ETs. And I asked them what they wanted. They said there was a group of people that wished to meet with me. And I said, well, I've got to finish my paper round, and I've got to go to school this morning, and I can't be late for school. They said, well, we'll bring you back, and you'll be back in time for school. I said, okay, I agreed to go with them. I went with them, and we went onto a large craft, a mothership. And the only reason I know it was a mothership was because of the size of it. It was huge. We went into the hangar, we got out of the small craft. There was a small grey working on one of the craft who I've come to know now. His name is Tia. He's a pilot, he's a technician, and I've met him and interacted with him. I was then led down into an amphitheatre, and in the amphitheatre was a large group of people. The amphitheatre was full. At the front of the amphitheatre, there was a stage. On that stage were 8 beings. Now, at that time, I thought I was there to be paraded as a young human boy for these extraterrestrials to see. I was a little bit apprehensive, but I wasn't frightened. I was led down to the front of the amphitheatre, walked onto the stage, and I was introduced to the group of 8. They were Ort, Dee, Anna, Zark, Ra, who leads the council, Tag, Chica, and Orla. Several different species there. And they describe themselves as a council of 8. They're responsible for this quadrant of the galaxy. They live within this quadrant of our galaxy at the moment. They're here in our solar system.
Kevin Briggs has been relaying messages from his ET guides for a long time. His interaction with what he calls the Council of 8 is remarkable. You don't want to miss it on the next episode of the Aliens Revealed Live Files. And thanks for being with us once again. Don't forget to check out our site at arlhub.com. That's arlhub.com. And as always, keep looking upwards and take care.